Hello, everyone. My name is Joanne Lockwood, and I am the host of the Inclusion Bites podcast. In this series, I will be interviewing a number of amazing people and simply having a conversation around the subject of inclusion, belonging, and generally making the world a better place for everyone to thrive in. If you'd like to join me in the future and be a guest, then please do drop me a line to joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk. You'll also be able to catch up with all of the shows on iTunes, Spotify, and all of the usual places. So plug in your headphones, grab a decaf, and let's get going. Today's episode is episode 2 with the title, Embracing Diversity and Inclusion as a Small Business Owner. And I have the absolute honor and privilege to be joined by my friend, Katie Neves. I first met Katie at a True Inclusion event last summer in London, but we've been online business associates for much longer. Katie is a photographer, and she also runs a speaking business and advocacy called Cool to be Trans. So earlier I asked Katie to describe her superpower, and she said, being able to connect with people, be very honest, and to be able to get her passion across. Isn't that amazing? So hello, Katie. How are you?
Hello, Joe. Thanks very much for inviting me on podcast number 2. Woo,
Yay. Woo. Exciting. So tell us a bit about yourself. What is your business? What do you do?
Right. Well, I've been a photographer and filmmaker for 33 years. But 2 years ago, I came out very publicly as being transgender after living for 48 years as a man. So I now have a new business as a Transgender Ambassador, which runs alongside my photography business. So I help companies with their diversity and inclusion by doing trans awareness training, public speaking, and media appearances. But I'm still doing the photography as well. So I've got those two things on the go. But they fulfill both of my passions. So I'm passionate about photography and video, and I'm passionate about helping people with their diversity and inclusion. Particularly, I think with trans, I think what I find is that a lot of trans people don't know that it's okay to be trans, and as you know, it really is. It really is.
I don't think so.
but so many trans people don't know that, and so I want to try and, if I can, lead by example and just show people that I'm happy. I'm so much happier as I am now, life's good.
Yeah, so you must have had a dilemma those 2 or 3 years ago about your business, how people would accept you, whether the world was ready for a Katie like you, or whether you'd find your business falling apart. I mean, how have you found the world to be in the last couple of years?
It's been an interesting couple of years, I say. It's been, but good though. It's good on the whole. Good. I've had some challenges along the way. I mean, the first challenge was that the name of my photography business was, and still is, named after my old male name, which is Martin. So it's called Martin Neves Photography and Film. Now, things when I was about to come out, it had been an established brand for 22 years then, and I felt that I didn't want to change the name of the business because I could have changed it to Katie Neves Photography and Film, but then I thought, well, nobody would know who I was. So I thought I had to keep the name of the business the same, otherwise it'd be starting from scratch. So I thought the only way I could do it was to come out very openly and very honestly as being transgender, and continue to do that to this day, which I am. So I thought the only thing to do is just to be very open and honest and be big, bold, and out there. So what I did, I made a coming out video. And I sent that to all my clients, and I put it on all my social media, and then sat back and worried. I didn't know what the reaction would be. I was absolutely bricking it, Joe. I'll tell you. Yeah. It was
technical term.
Absolutely, it was just I really didn't know, because everything was riding on my whole livelihood, my reputation, everything was resting on the reaction to that video. I was so worried. But what happened was I put it, the first social media I put it out on was Facebook. And I remember my finger hovering over the mouse very nervously, thinking, as soon as I make that click, my life will never be the same again. But anyway, I made the click, and then I waited. But then I had a job that I had to go out on. And I went out on this job, remember it very clearly now. My mind wasn't on the job at all. I just wanted to get it done as quickly as possible. The client was very happy with the pictures and everything, but I couldn't wait to get back just to see what's happening on Facebook. And I tell you, I needn't have worried, because when I got back, I was inundated with literally hundreds of messages of support. It was amazing. I felt so loved. I really did. And it went from being something that was something that I was absolutely dreading to be one of the most uplifting experiences of my life. It was absolutely incredible. And I was, as well as being inundated with messages of support from friends and from clients, I also had a lot of messages from other trans people saying that they'd been struggling with it, but what I'd said had really helped, and they thanked me for it. So that really spurred me on. It's been incredible. But say you're asking about the reaction from clients. I've had a variety of. I have lost some clients through it, and I expected that I would, because the problem is that as a photographer, I haven't got any long-term contracts. It's all short-term stuff. So people phone up on freelance. People phone up, they want a job doing. I quote for it. If they find it acceptable, I do it, and that's it. And then it's on to the next one. And so if they've got a problem with it, then they just don't ring me. The phone stops ringing. So I felt very vulnerable, to be honest. I had no laws of discrimination. If you work for a company, you can't be discriminated. Well, you can be, but you get taken to a tribunal if you do. You're protected. I had no protection at all. So running a small business and coming out as trans, very, very challenging. Very. I have lost some clients, but in the main, most of them have been very good and supportive. And I've had some that have been really good. And I think some of them, actually, I might have actually had a little bit of positive discrimination, because I think I might have ticked a few boxes for them. And I think, well, actually, I'll take that, because I've lost a few. So I'll take that. And I've found I have had a few issues so I do quite a bit of business networking and stuff as well. And I have run into a few issues with some people there as well. I think that some people just didn't want to hear about my trans stuff. They just wanted to hear about my photography stuff. I have had a few problems like that. And you get some people who just, they don't want to know about anything about diversity. And they just say, oh, I'm old school. Well, I'm sorry, they need to.
Old school.
They do. That's what I've had that said to me. I'm old school, and they say that after they've just misgendered me, and I think, oh, come on, get real. But in the main, I think because I've approached it how I have, and I've approached it very head on, and being very open. And I've said to people, I've cut people quite a lot of slack. The people who have known me as Martin for years, I know that they're going to slip up from time to time, and they're going to call me Martin sometimes, or they're going to say he and him. And I don't mind because I know the people who are supportive and the people who are not. So I know if it's somebody who is supportive and they normally get it right and they just slip up, it's not a big deal at all. I'm not offended in the slightest. And they beat themselves up about it. I don't beat them up. I just sort of say, no, don't worry about it. They just apologise and move on. But I know they're beating themselves up about it. But I also know the people who aren't supportive and the people that deliberately misgender me, and then that's abuse, and I won't stand for that. So, but don't you? You know the people
I have a very similar outlook on life, but I kind of categorize people into several boxes. One box being, you've known me for 30, 40 years. It's difficult, and I know it's difficult, and you can't bully people. You have to work with them and educate them, and give them time, as you say, cut them some slack. And then there's other people who have only known me as Joe, and that's where I get more frustrated, where people have only known me as me, and they're lazy, or they don't make the effort, or randomly they just get it wrong, and that's a bit more frustrating.
I find exactly the same, because generally the new friends, the people who have only known me as Katie, tend not to get it wrong. But then when they do, it does hurt, doesn't it?
Well, it's confusing. It's like, where did they ever know this? So where did that come from? It's like, and they go, I don't know. It just came out. Sorry. And it's like, the previous podcast, episode 1, I talked to Dr. Linda Shaw about this, about how the brain and the heuristics and the biases kick in, and how reptilian fast brain stuff kicks in, and you can't always control it. So yeah, it's strange. I suppose I get mostly frustrated by service providers. So someone who's working in a shop, a restaurant, airport check-in, trains, where people are paid and their role is customer service. That's where I get most frustrated, because I would like to think in this day investing in the online initiatives, they're making the staff train. Okay, just put your slip up. I find often people are not either educated or they're just a bit lazy beyond what they should be. So those are the people I tend to get most frustrated with, ordering coffee in Starbucks or Costa or one of the concessions on Waterloo Station, and you get a, "What do you want, mate?" Or "You are, sir," and you think, come on, really? Oh. I've had a long day. Can I just go home without you adding to my burden,
Yeah, exactly. It's just, when I did a job recently, for a photography job, and it was on a building site. And the client was actually there. He's a developer, and he was there. And it's funny, when he phoned me, he found my website. Of course, it's got Martin Neves Photography all over it, but it's got a bit about me. It's got a picture of me, and it says I'm Katie, and it explains all about my transition and things. So I'm very open about it. And so he phoned me to get me to quote for this job, and he subsequently booked me for the job. And then when he was on the phone, he said, so he hadn't read it all properly. He said, so who's Martin then? So I said, I used to be called Martin, but I'm in transition. And he said, oh, right, okay. And, I assumed just he accepted it, fine. Anyway, I then got the job, and I went out on the building site to do this job. And all the builders that I spoke to, and they were fine. And, they clearly saw me as the real me, and they sort of calling me my dear and everything, and it's fine. But then at one point when he was talking, we were talking as a group, and there's some builders there, and then him and me, and then he referred to me as he and him. I thought, where did that come from? And so I just corrected him, so I said she, and then after that he couldn't actually bring himself to say she or her. He was just saying Katie the whole time, so he couldn't get the pronoun. I thought, well, okay, well that's so I don't know whether that was him just not accepting me as female, but I don't know. But it just seemed a bit odd that he couldn't actually bring himself to say her or she.
I find some people it's easier to use your name, and I say this to people when I'm training, that if you're not sure, you're not comfortable, just use someone's name all the time, because they say that's their name, you can't get it wrong. And so that is often the best way out. If you're worried about making a slip up, just stick to the name.
Yeah, or even just go for they them, because that covers everyone. You can't get it wrong that way, can you?
No, not at all. No. Well, there's some people do question the use of singular they them, but we all know the challenge with that as well. But so you must have had as you said just now, you had this big dilemma. You obviously planned it. You were going to do what you had to do, and you picked a date. So how many times, maybe in the last year before that, had you had that go, no go situation? Or was this was the first attempt at doing it, or had you backed off before?
It was actually the first attempt at doing it. Yeah. No, I did it all pretty much to plan. It's funny actually, because I did it. It was in. I only admitted to myself that I've had gender dysphoria all my life, and previously considered myself as a cross-dresser. So that was right up until what was it? October, November 2017, when my gender dysphoria just went through the roof. I wasn't expecting it to do it at all, but it just went through the roof. And then I just didn't know what gender I was at all. And then after the whole journey of discovery, then went up to it was January the 11th, 2018. That's when I admitted to myself that I was trans. And then it was then like full steam ahead. Right, I admitted to myself, I need to do something about it. And then I just started planning for it. And because of some of the work that I had in, some of the weddings that I was photographing, particularly, that was the main concern. I wanted to start living full-time as female from early September. And that's exactly what happened. It was September the 2nd, 2018, that I started living full-time as female. But what I did do, I came out to everyone earlier. I came out on the 26th of April. 2018. So I had quite a few months in between, and that was really, really awkward. If I'd had the time again, I wouldn't come out as early. But I did a straw poll of quite a lot of my trans friends and say, well, look, I'm planning on coming out in September. Just going full time in September. Yeah. Should I come out earlier? Should I come out now, or should I wait till a few weeks before? Because the original plan was to come out just a few weeks before and then just get straight into it. And pretty much unanimously, they said, no, come out earlier, come out now, sooner rather than later, give people time to get their heads around it. So I thought, okay, so I did. So say 26th of April, that's when I came out. But people actually got their heads around it a lot quicker than I gave them credit for. And then I found that they started getting impatient with me because what was happening is I was living that double life where people knew that I was trans. I'd come out as trans. They knew my female name as Katie. So, but business networking and on jobs, I was still presenting as male. So it was a very, very confusing time all round. And so I was getting a lot of people some people were calling me Martin, some people were calling me Katie, some people were calling me matey. and I had a lot of, hello, you. They didn't know what to call me. It was a very confusing time for them, bless them.
I love matey. I think matey's fantastic, isn't it?
Matey, I had a lot of that.
Yeah.
I never expected at all.
I had a similar experience because I called it transitioning in chunks. So I basically picked things off that I was doing and sort of transitioned in those roles. And it became the point where I got to a tipping point where most of me was Joe and the rest of me was sort of like just the dreg. Well, actually, the dregs was my major employment. And I found that personally quite tricky, and also for the people who knew both sides of me, that was also tricky for them. And I kind of had to explain to them, well, if you can't see me and you can't tell, call me my old name. If you can see me and it looks like if I look like Joe and dress like Joe, then call me Joe. If you can't tell, call me the old name. And that's kind of the way I worked it. But yeah, I would certainly. I just believe. I think with hindsight, ripping the plaster off and jumping all in as quick as you can is for me with hindsight would have been a better way of doing it.
I would have definitely delayed. I wouldn't have come out if I did it again. I wouldn't come out as early as April. I think going full time in early September, I would have maybe come out in August. Yeah. I think that would have been the right time frame.
What's the difference in your life between April and September? Then what was that lag? What was the hold off?
What that was that it was the wedding side of my business that I was worried about. The weddings was where I felt most vulnerable, to be honest, because at weddings you get all sorts of people there, from very young to very old. And in my experience, it tends to be the older people who have trouble getting their heads around this and understanding it. And so, whereas I think the younger people generally accept it a lot more readily than older people. So I was really worried about that, and I was worried also at weddings. So as well as you could have bigoted old aunts and uncles there, but, as well as that, you can have there's lots of booze, isn't there, at weddings, and not just that, it's free booze. So free booze and bigots is not a great recipe. So I just thought, well, that's where I felt my most vulnerable. So I thought, well, I had a load of weddings that were booked up to then, and I'd already made a decision that, because I don't just do weddings, I do a lot of commercial photography. It was mainly corporate photography and videography and that sort of thing. But the weddings were about a third of my income. But I'd already decided, I used to do lots of wedding fairs. So like nearly every Sunday I was off doing a wedding fair. And so, wedding fairs are very competitive. There are just so many photographers around, and they can book loads of photographers in at the wedding fairs. So, you could go to even the smallest wedding fair, you'd have 4 photographers there. And the larger ones, you'd have like 10 or something. And they're so competitive. And where I'm sort of aimed more at the mid to top end of the market anyway. So already a lot of my market isn't there, because a lot of people that go to wedding fairs, they're looking for a bargain. They just want something cheap. And so I'm not, they're not in my market anyway. So already, I'm limiting myself. But then I just felt really uneasy, particularly mainly because of my voice. because what I didn't want, often you can grab hold of it, or you can call people over just to get their attention, because you have to be super confident when you're doing these wedding fairs. And I wasn't confident, particularly with my voice. Now, my voice it's lightened a bit from what it was, but it hasn't lightened that much. I know I still sound like a bloke. Now, when people see me in person, that's not so bad. On the phone, I just get misgendered all the time. But I just find that I found at a wedding fair, I wasn't confident enough to be able to stand there, because I think if I called someone over, if I grabbed someone, they might hear my voice, but then not see me straight away. And then they see me standing there in front of the banner saying Martin Neves Photography and Film. And I just thought, I'm just loading the dice against me, because I thought, well, even though the young couples might be okay with me being trans, they probably would be. Most I think would be. Apart from some that are maybe very religious, they might not, because quite a lot of those aren't. I just thought they just might think, well, what about our guests, and what guests are we inviting? And we've got a load of elderly ones. If they know that some of them are a bit outspoken or a bit bigoted, they might just feel a bit awkward about booking a trans photographer, because they might think, well, is it a problem that we just needn't have? And it just might be easier to book a non-trans photographer. So
yeah, that's interesting you say that. I've experienced that in my life, where the person you're talking to is kind of, I'm okay with you. I haven't got a problem with you. Whoever you are, you're fine. But I'm worried about what other people will think. And what they're saying is, I'm worried what other people will think of me if I introduce you. And I'm worried that they're going to be dangerous. And so therefore, I'd rather not take a risk.
Yeah.
So I'll go somewhere else. And that's kind of this bias by proxy. You're almost imprinting your biases onto somebody else and assuming the worst.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think I've had that with my commercial work as well. I've definitely lost some work because of that, definitely. But with the weddings, I just decided to preempt it, and so I just thought, well, I'm just going to take the hit, and so I stopped doing the wedding fest, and consequently, the income from the wedding side of my business has dropped massively. So I don't do that many now. So I just do the ones where people are recommended, and they know that I can do a good job, and I get recommended, and they're fine, and I just do it. But I did have an interesting one, actually, that over the time of my transition, where I photographed the wedding ceremony as Martin and the reception as Katie. So I probably ought to expand on that a bit, because they weren't on the same day. They were months apart. It was a couple that they actually got married in secret, and there were only 4 people there, including the couple. Well, it was 4 people plus me and a videographer. So they just got married at a registry office, and then they had the 2 witnesses, and then went off just for photo shoots. So that was in April 2018. So that was just a few weeks just before I came out. But then their reception was in late August. It was the late August bank holiday in 2018. So it was those few months. So I photographed the wedding ceremony, then I came out, and the couple were brilliant. They were so supportive of me. They were brilliant. They were sort of following me all the way through. It was great. And although their wedding reception was just before I was going to be living full time as female, because originally I was planning to do that as Martin. Because a whole load that I had lined up, that was going to be as Martin, and I was just going to do that and just do that and put it to bed. That's it. Yeah. But they were so supportive. They really encouraged me. They said, "Oh, we'd really like you to do it as Katie." And I didn't know whether I'd be able to, and I was like, I don't know. I was really nervous, and I said I'm going to have to leave it to the last minute to decide whether I can do it or not. But I did it, and I'm so glad I did, because they were brilliant, and I didn't have any problems at all. And the majority of the sort of style of photography that I do at weddings is reportage. So it's very natural documentary photography, a lot of candid photography, because I just think it's so much nicer, and it brings out the characters of people. Also, it's less intrusive on the wedding. So that was what the majority of it. So the majority of the time, most people didn't hear me speaking loudly anyway, so that wasn't a problem. But the only problem was that they did want a few group shots, which most couples do. Of course, with those, I had to project my voice. Of course,
corral them in, and
of course, so there's one thing, talking in a more feminine voice. Anyway, there's another thing, actually, projecting your voice, doing it. It's really hard. you know that. It's hard, isn't it? So I was just so conscious of it. I was so worried, but I'll tell you what, I didn't have a single problem. It was just brilliant, and it was a lovely wedding. And I'm so glad I did it, and it was a real confidence booster.
So this was 2 years ago, and all these anxieties, all these apprehensions. So the voice was a big deal.
Yeah.
People were going to say. So looking back to 2 year old self, what advice would you give yourself? I mean, what have you learned over those 2 years?
I think I'd tell myself to not worry so much, because actually, I remember the first time, apart from that wedding, but the first time I went out on a commercial job and started living full time as Katie, and just going out on a job in a dress, I was thinking, oh God, yeah, what are people going to say? What? and it's like, well, without exception, people have just treated me with the utmost respect, and as the professional that I am, and that I'm there as a photographer, and I know that I can do a good job. I'm confident with what I do. And I think the more I've done it, the more confident I've got. And I just go in there and I don't even think about it now. This is me. This is the real me. I just go in and do my stuff. And I think a lot of it is what you portray, what you project comes back at you. If you go in there all nervous with your head down or looking over your shoulder, and I've got any funny looks and what people are saying, and then you make yourself a victim. And you attract that sort of thing, but because now I'm just like really confident and don't even think about it. That comes back to me. It's great.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, and that's kind of what I learned over the last few years as well. That if you go into the world with a smile, the world smiles back. If you go into a frown, the world frowns back. So treat people as you want to be treated, sort of thing, and in a way where. Open your heart, open your arms to people, and they embrace you. And I think that's not just trans people, but all people. If you go in with a person not less of a dick because they're trans, if you like, being trans doesn't make you less of a dick. If you're a dick, you're a dick. And I think if you approach the world with anger and aggression, then you get it back. So I'm with you on that. So you kind of. Not bothered so much about your voice. I mean, you can tell I decided not to bother because it's kind of my voice. I kind of like it, so why worry about it?
Yeah, I have done some work with it, but I haven't done as much as perhaps I should do. And I think it's the same sort of thing. Like you've got a business, public speaking. When you're doing a lot of speaking, you're thinking about what you're saying rather than how you say. And that is more important. And I think, and I've got to the point where thinking, well, actually, this whole journey is about authenticity, and this is my authentic voice. I'm not putting on an act for anybody. But having said that, I know that if I do put more of an effort in, then it'll just make my life easier in certain circumstances. So I do want to still do a bit more work with it. I know if I just take my voice back to how it used to be, I'll try and do it. Hang on. Okay, it was down there. That was how I used to speak. So that was my normal voice as Martin. So I was talking very much from my chest, just down there. So, whereas I'm talking much more now from my head. So it's subtle, but it's gone up a bit. Still got some more work to do with it, I know. But that's where I am at the moment. But I think it's better to do it as a gradual thing. I think I tried. I had a bit of voice coaching, to begin with, and then didn't do as much work with it as perhaps I should do. And I've sort of settled at this for the time being. But I think if I can gradually just eke it up a little bit, then I think that'll help. And I think a gradual thing is better.
I struggle with is coughing or sneezing. It's hard to disguise a cough or a sneeze, isn't it?
And laughing as well, because laughing is just a natural thing. It's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I've stopped worrying about the phone. If someone misgenders me on the phone, I kind of just I pick my moments. Sometimes I'll correct them. Sometimes I think if I'm phoning a garage to have my MOT booked in, they call me geez or a mate or something. I think I can't be bothered with this. It doesn't matter. It's not important. Just whatever. I'll see you tomorrow. You can pick the car up. Then I arrive, give them the keys, and pick it up later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's certain battles that are just not worth playing with. You just whatever.
And it's funny. I try the times that I try more. Say like when I'm just picking the phone up, and I don't know who's calling. So that's when I'll try. I'll start off with hi, Katie Neves, hello, and I'm up there a bit more. I'm trying to get up there. And then when I hear who it is, if it's somebody who knows me, then I relax a bit more and
drop a couple of octaves. Hello. Yeah.
Oh, go right down there. Yeah.
Resonance going in the chest.
So I try more that, and so like if I'm in a shop or somewhere where I'm not going to be coming out to them and telling them that I'm trans, and I've got no intention of doing that. It's a short conversation. Then I'll try more. Then actually, whereas most of the time, say like if I'm out networking or whatever, or if I'm doing presentation work, most of the time people know that I'm trans because I'm there talking about it. I'm doing a trans awareness training workshop or whatever, so they know that I'm doing that. Or if I'm promoting Cool to be trans, I have to come out in the process of telling them about the business. So I don't
kind of big secret about it doesn't work, does it? It's part of the authenticity of what you're doing, isn't it?
It is, and I find that once I've told them, that takes the pressure off me with my voice, and it's a bit of a cop out. It's a bit of a cop out, really, isn't it? But it works.
Similar. I do a lot of big stage speaking around trans inclusion and diversity. Yeah. So I remember being I was in Berlin on a stage there. There's 600 or 700 people in the audience, and I deliberately hold back for a few seconds before I start talking, just so the audience look at me, they get a visual identity of who I am, and then I speak. And I actually had people come up to me afterwards going, wow, that completely blew my mind. Where did that voice come from, sort of thing? It was kind of everyone's kind of, but it's a great attention grabber. It's a great way of bringing people into the room, get their focus. So I suppose I tend to use it to my advantage and not be ashamed of it now.
Oh, well, I'm certainly not ashamed of it at all. But I get where you're coming from.
I mean, the funniest time I remember was I was on a train coming back from Waterloo to Portsmouth, and the old buffet trolley. They push the trolleys down the corridor, don't they? And normally they go 100 miles an hour. You have to almost like shout at the buffet guy, "So come back here! I wanted one." And it's like, but this guy was kind of looking either side, and I said, "Black coffee, please," in a very resonating voice, and the whole carriage sort of like went, "Whoa, where did you come from?" It's like this big reveal, because I just sat there minding my own business. Everyone's minding their own business with their phones, and then it was kind of this big sort of like, and what, kind of, so what? And then
you start singing, "I am what I am."
And there's this chap sat next to me. He'd been sat there for like 20 minutes, half an hour. He sat next to me. And as soon as I spoke, he looked at me with horror. And then as soon as the trolley went past, he literally grabbed on his bag and ran down the corridor, looking over his shoulder. And then at the end, I could see him at the end of the seat looking over, staring at me. It's like, oh, I obviously had a big effect on him, Kind of, oh, well.
You've been known to clear railway carriages. Fantastic.
So now I kind of, I don't play with it. I don't do it deliberately, but I've lost my anxiety about saying, "Excuse me, can I have a coffee, please?"
I still do have a bit of anxiety over that, because I find that, especially when you want to project yourself like that, I do find you want to grab people's attention. By doing that, you're outing people. So for instance, I did a wedding a little while ago, and just before doing the group shots, I was finding out once organising people, but actually getting the attention of the room. At Martin, I always used to sort of say, "Ladies and gentlemen," and in a big deep voice, and it would cut through. But I just didn't want to do it this time, because I thought, if I do that, that's just going to out me to everyone there. And then what I didn't want was to hear a great intake of breath from all the guests. I'd be mortified by that. So I really didn't want that. So I just got the best man just to get their attention, and then just to direct people to where I was.
Yeah.
And then once I was there, then I was talking to them and directing them. But then that didn't seem too bad, because I was just telling people what's going, and then they obviously just realised in their own time that I was trans, but that wasn't so bad. But what I didn't want was for me just to make that big announcement. I do still have a bit of that worry there. So I'm sure.
Is it getting less? I mean, is it an anxiety you can manage, or is it? We talk about bringing our whole self to work. So you're still not quite being able to bring your whole self, or are you bringing the bit of yourself you want to bring and leaving the bit you don't want to bring at home? Is that
no, I am bringing my whole self there. I think it's just it's purely over that bit, just getting people's attention initially, that I didn't in that situation. It's okay, like it wouldn't be a problem, if people were there and they knew they were there to be photographed. But just in that situation, I just didn't want to be making that big announcement. Yeah. That was the only thing that I didn't want to do, because it's different if it's at a trans awareness training thing, because they all know that I'm trans anyway. But it was just in that particular situation, I didn't want to get their attention. But once their attention had been got, then I talked to them, no problem at all. So it's
definitely a takeaway for some of the people listening to this podcast, is that if they have trans people in their workplace, or they have people who are going to transition, they need to be kind of conscious of the anxieties that may be gone in that person's head, and some of the barriers they face on a daily basis, and how you as an organisation can maybe make that life easier through those anxieties. Yeah, absolutely,
and there are so many, aren't there? I mean, just in going to work in a dress for the first time is, it's hard. It's really hard.
I was consulting with a big global multinational based in Paris, and they called me in to help advise them on a person at work who wanted to transition. And this person had some major anxieties, and they built it up into a point where they believed the world was going to discriminate against them regardless of any evidence. But the company was absolutely super supportive. But this person was convinced the security guards were laughing at them behind their back, the people in the canteen were laughing at them. And I wouldn't quite say it's paranoia, but there's a level of projecting what they were expecting onto people. Yeah. But one of their big anxieties was the toilets. I mean, we all I don't think any trans person exists that hasn't had a toilet conversation with somebody, or at least been part of the debate. But one of the big challenges they had was they'd never been into this particular lady's toilet.
Right.
And so their major anxiety was walking through that door for the first time. And you don't know what's on the other side of the door. You don't know what maybe the protocols are, what it looks like, where the hand soap is, where the towels are, how the cubicles lock. So if you're trying to just get in, get out, get with your business, that initial bit of anxiety about the protocol and just what's in there can be a bit of a shock. I mean, I just said to the HR manager there, well, why don't you allow or invite this person to maybe after hours use the toilets, feel comfortable in there, you wait outside and just experience that environment in your own time. And then when they come to use them the next day, the anxiety's gone. And maybe, again, out of hours, allow them to walk into the building, allow them to walk into the lift, allow them to feel that relaxation. So when they do it live with people around, it's not a brand new experience. And these are a couple of things I often say to companies is, by going that extra little bit of mile, you don't even think about as an issue, can really change someone's lives, but just by giving them that space to be themselves. So I remember, I don't know if you've had this experience, but motorway service stations. The first time I think I went to a motorway service station, you walk in there, everyone's just kind of milling around, aren't they? No, you're either doing something or you're sat there waiting for somebody who's doing something. And there's a whole load of people that are milling around in the sort of area between Costa and KFC and all that bit. And then the toilets are right dead opposite you, aren't they? And you walk into the toilets, it's like a chicane. You go in and you turn right, and then you're into this unknown space. You've got absolutely no idea what's going to be around the corner of you. It's like, so Voyage of Discovery, and you get in there, and there's a queue of women, and you think, blimey, what's the protocol? Do I get on the end of the queue? Do I nip around the corner, see if I can find an empty cubicle? How do I play this game? It's like, so you're standing there trying to think, really nervous, and it's your turn to think, okay, where do I go? Do I run a quick cubicle lock? Made it. Safe. And think, right, now I've got to come out again. Right, okay, right, someone says something as I'm coming out. Wash your hands, don't look in the mirror, just dry your hair, right, out. Survived. And that's kind of, I always describe the motorway service station toilets as my worst anxiety nightmare.
Really?
Because there was just such an unknown, unpredictable, you've no idea what's behind that door experience. Right. And I just had it in my head that this was going to be a flashpoint, because you're standing around waiting for the toilet with a whole load of people, women, and you end up chatting to each other or looking at each other, we say hurry up. The kind of conversation you have in the toilets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my voice, I think, well, I don't have a conversation in here with my voice.
I know.
My other nightmare is walking to the toilets with a female colleague, and she just wants to keep on talking.
I know.
As soon as men walk into a toilet, no one says a word, do they? It's actually empty silence. So we just get in there, do our biz, wash up. Well, we didn't wash our hands. We just walk straight out.
Yeah,
done.
Absolutely.
It's chatting in and out. You have adjacent cubicles. You're talking through the door. You chit chat. And I just find it really uncomfortable with my voice having a conversation in a women's toilet behind a locked door. It's like,
I do. I find it exactly the same, and it's a real eye opener. That because they say men don't talk to each other in the loos, but women do all the time, and. Because it's one thing when they can see you, it's not a problem. But when they can't see you, it's just like being on the phone, isn't it? So I had, my daughter still calls me daddy because I'm proud to be her dad, and I always will be her dad.
Yeah.
And but the only time I ban her from calling me dad or daddy is in the ladies' loos. And we had an incident one time when I was in a cubicle and she was just standing outside the door. And she said, I was doing business and I heard this. That's right. There was a couple of women in cubicles either side of me. And I heard this little voice from outside the door saying, Daddy. Then there was a pause. And it's, oh, Katie. I thought, oh God, it's too late now, isn't it? But then it got worse. Then she said, so I said, yes, darling. She said, so Daddy, so are you going to start having your periods now then? I thought, no, just don't do this to me. So I just said in my highest voice I could, no, darling. And then there was a pause, and then it's, so why is that then? So I'll talk to you about it later, darling. Oh, no, just don't do this to me. So, oh, God. I just wanted the ground to open up and just swallow me up. But I couldn't get out of those loos quick enough, I tell you.
No, I can imagine. That's yeah. I mean, one of the issues, one of the problems that I faced recently is my wife's office Christmas party.
Okay.
So I've been out and about transition for 3 and a bit years now. The world's known for nearly 3.5 years, and I've never made my wife's Christmas party before because in the early stages she didn't know how to approach the subject. She didn't know how to tell her colleagues that, oh, by the way, my husband's trans, and in case it reflected badly on her, she's got her own anxieties about how she's going to be judged.
Yeah.
So the first year she took my daughter. The second year she took a friend, and this past Christmas she took me. And only a few of her colleagues knew the full story, meaning that she didn't know that well from different offices. There were field service companies, so there were people coming from all over the country there. And she started introducing me as her other half. And I sort of like nudged her and joked with her and said, well, if going back 20 years, if I'd have introduced you as my other half, how would you have felt? And she went, well, so you're not proud that I'm your husband? She said, well, I don't really think it's easy to introduce you as my husband when you're wearing a dress. I said, that's a fair point. So
just such a gendered term, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
we kind of agreed that other half was better than partner because partner implied some other relationship. So we decided to stick with other half. And but it's very interesting just to watch her coming out, if you like, to people. And me having conversations with their work colleagues. And I remember chatting with one lady around the table. You sit around the table eating your turkey and stuff. And 3/4 of the way through the conversation, I said something about what I do, trans awareness workshops and all this sort of thing. She went, are you trans? I went, oh, yeah. Thank you for not noticing.
Yeah, it's great when that happens, isn't it? It's just, I had that the other day.
She must have been drunk. I suppose I have quite a limiting belief about my voice, so I kind of just assume that people suss it with my voice. I
assume the same.
Yeah.
I assume exactly the same, Joe. Yeah. I had that the other day. I was at a networking thing, and I was talking to this woman, talking for about 10 minutes to begin with, and mainly talking about the stuff that she was doing to begin with. And then she said, "Well, so what do you do?" And so then I just said two things. I'm a photographer and filmmaker, and I'm also a trans ambassador because I'm transgender. And then the look on her face, she looked so shocked. And then she just said, "Oh, I've got to give you a hug." And she gave me this big hug and then spilt all her coffee everywhere. but yeah, it's nice. It's nice when that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. Right, so I mean, let's give our listeners something to more stuff to take away here. So earlier you mentioned about you're meeting members of the public, weddings. You've got there may be less educated or the less open-minded people in a party. You've got people maybe from different generations who have different lived experience that maybe don't understand. Most often, people aren't being deliberately nasty; they're just lack awareness. So, one of your superpowers is to approach the world and give people your passion and smile and educate. So how do you tackle those situations where you perceive that there's a confusion? So what advice would you give people? How to approach you, or how would you approach people?
I think smiling is a huge thing. I think it goes such a long way because it just breaks down barriers and it shows people that you're confident and you're happy in yourself. And I think it's such a big thing. There's a lot of trans activists about that. A lot of them are very angry and they're fighting a good cause, but I think a lot of the time they end up damaging the cause because they turn people off it. Whereas I think if you can actually just bring them along and acknowledge that they're struggling to get their heads around it, but then help them with it and actually just show, well, I'm not somebody to be afraid of. I'm not somebody to be pitied. Be happy for me because I'm happy. I'm happy in my own skin. I'm happier now than I've ever been. Okay, there's lots of struggles going on, and we know that it's not an easy journey being trans by any means. But in myself, because I'm living my truth, it feels amazing, absolutely amazing. And so I've lost count of the number of people who've told me I look so much happier now than I did before, and I'm not surprised because I feel happy, and so I think that's the main thing. Because if you can just smile and be happy, and that just breaks down those barriers, and I think you can bring people with you, definitely.
Yeah, but I recognise that is quite a privilege. I'm privileged to the fact that I can smile, I can be happy. My lived experience is very positive, but we all know that not everybody has the same reason to be happy, for want of a better way. No. Maybe they're really struggling with their income, really struggling with their work. Maybe they're getting bullied. Maybe they've been put into a point where they no longer have faith in society. So we've had a very positive experience, and I think we shouldn't undermine or minimize the experience had by others, which is sometimes where their frustration overflows because of the microaggressions, the drip, every time they go out, and the environment they're in. And I think that is a struggle that a lot of people have, and we're lucky not to have that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because of the sort of work that we're both doing, and that we're both very much out. I mean, neither of us could be more out if we tried. Let's face it. Could we really?
Out. We're out.
Yeah. I mean, short of putting it on a massive, great big billboard. Yeah. So I think we're very lucky in the fact because we've approached it like that. I think it's come back at us, and so it sort of solved any problem. Yeah. Whereas I think a lot of people, are much more shy and they do have a tough time with it. And I think a lot of it is that they put so much pressure on themselves with it, whereas they needn't do. But I think it's just getting across to them that it really is okay to be trans, and that the world will accept them as being trans. Not everybody. Some people won't. Well, I've lost some friends through it, and I've lost some family through it as well. Got a lot of family through it, but still the majority of people are absolutely fine with it. And I think that's one of the things that was the one big worry. So I just didn't know whether people would be okay with it. But certainly in the main, I found that most people are. And it's just a case of just trying to sort of get that into your head that, most people are going to be okay with it.
Or the ones that aren't, they just disappear from your life often. You don't see them.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. It's situations like this when you learn who your true friends are. It's a very effective way of finding it. It's quite an extreme way of finding out who your friends are, but it's very effective. Certainly some people who I previously thought were friends turned out not to be. But then others who I didn't realize they were such good friends have actually been really, really supportive. They've been fantastic, and think, wow, and they've actually become better friends to it. And plus, as well as those, I've also gained a whole load of new friends who I wouldn't have met had I not been transitioned. My world has just opened up so much, and it's been incredible actually. Well, you're one of them. You're one of the people.
Right. Yeah, I've got thousands of new friends I never had 3 years ago, and I travel around the world. I meet new people every time. Every time I go and speak at a conference, I'm generally meeting 200, 300 new people for the first time every time. And so I'm constantly outing myself, if you like, or being open about who I am. One thing you said there about God. My mind's gone blank. What was I thinking about? What were we talking about? We're talking about
constantly outing yourself.
Yeah. God, my mind's frazzled. The other thing I was going to talk to you about is people often say to me, "Is it the older generation? Is it the younger generation? Is it?" In my experience, it doesn't matter whether you're old, young, middle-aged, or whatever age you are. It's not about your age often. It's about your socialization, your social groups, the people you hang around with. And I couldn't say there's more older people struggle or more younger people struggle. It's kind of like this cross section of who you are rather than your age.
Yeah, I think there are some sections of society who do struggle with it more, though. I think certainly, generally, I've found that the younger generation tend to be much more accepting. Not all, but I think generally they tend to be. Whereas I think the older generation, if you look about it, I mean, I'm 50 now, and so when I was growing up as a child in the 70s. If someone was gay, that was a scandal. It was a huge scandal. No one ever spoke about trans issues then. So if you think you take it back a generation, so people even older than that, you can see why they would struggle with it. It's just been in their culture and their education, the way they've been brought up, and older people generally find change more difficult than younger people anyway. So you can understand why older people would find. But then I know quite a lot of older people who are absolutely fine with it. So you can't generalise.
No, you can't. It's really difficult, isn't it? Yeah.
I have sort of found that. And also, I think religion is a big one. I think people who are very strongly religious. I mean, I lost my sister through this. My sister's a very evangelical, born-again Christian, and she just doesn't want to know me. And my mum's still struggling with it as well. And I think a lot of that is religious reasons as well.
You see, I wouldn't even go as far as say it's about religion. I mean, some of my great friends they would class themselves as devout Christians. I've got some great friends who would class themselves as devout Muslim and people of the Jewish faith, devout agnostic Satanists and spaghetti monsterists, So I've got people in my network of my friends who I would class as being of all religions.
Yeah,
and they're almost ashamed of the dogma sometimes from their religion, that they're embarrassed to be part of that religion, even though they're loyal and faithful to it. And so I don't think we can ever say that it's all people or religions to blame.
No, it's not.
Isn't it?
I think it's people using their religion they're blaming their bigotry on their religion. I think that's what it is. That they're using the religion as a tool, to
hiding behind it or weaponizing it.
Hiding behind it because they're bigots. Whatever, they're bigots and they're prejudiced, and that's it. But the reason they're giving for having how they are and having the beliefs they are is the religion. But they're just because I know, it's funny because I know people who are born again Christians, the same as my sister, and yet they're absolutely fine. They're absolutely fine with me, and they've got no problem at all. But there you go. That's.
I remember what I was going to say to you just now. It's coming back to my head. So it's interesting when you said about some people don't accept. And what I've found is I've had a very large group of friends around the country, but mainly in a clique, in a group. And a couple of that people in that group they were very vocal about what they thought, mainly in a sort of, they thought it was funny, humorous, disrespectful, all of those sort of things. And what surprised me was the people who were my closest friends in that group, I thought they understood what being an ally meant. But to me, it's very difficult to be friends with someone who's friends with someone who treats you in that way. And I almost wanted my friends to advocate for me and say, actually, you shouldn't say that about Joe. Yeah, we've got to sort this out. Where does the circle of trust lie? And what I found out was easier to be outside of the circle of trust, in my own circle of trust, than knowing that I'm talking to people who are able to harbour somebody with those views. And so I cut myself off for a lot of people in that circle. I cut them off and I didn't keep in contact with them because I know that they were supporting the person who had those nasty views. And I found that very difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that is what an ally and what a true ally does is stick up for it when they hear that. I went to a black tie reception just before Christmas, and I was fairly well known in the group there, but there was a chap that was there who was talking to another man. And this first one pointed me out and said, "Oh, you know who that is? Yeah, see that woman over there? Yeah, she used to be Martin Neves. But no, I don't get it at all." And there's been quite disparaging about me, but she was actually talking to somebody who was a real trans ally, and he watched quite a lot of my vlogs and everything and the stuff that I've been putting out on social media, and so that had educated him. And he said, "Well, actually, there's a lot more to it than you're just thinking now." And he just then explained to him, to this other guy, and I thought it was brilliant. And I didn't know this conversation was going on at all. It was only after the event that he actually told me that what had happened. And I thought, wow, good on him. That is what a true ally does. It really is. It's not just about being friends with that person. It is about sticking up for them when they can't stick up for themselves.
Completely. So I think we're yakking on for an hour now. We've had a great conversation. Is there anything you'd like to sort of kind of summarize up? What any top tips for engaging with small businesses, or not necessarily in trans specifically, but top tip for as a small business owner, what you've learned in terms of D&I?
Yeah, I think in terms of top tips for other businesses, I think be very aware of people who are different to everybody else, whether it's trans or race or whatever, or disability. I think just be very aware of their sensibilities. And also with something like someone coming out as being trans, you may already have someone who's trans in your workforce, but you just don't know it. And they just haven't come out yet. And the reason they haven't come out may be because you haven't got a very inclusive atmosphere in within the workforce, and so you're making it that much harder for them. And so, if you think of yourself as a good employer, then it's much better to actually get some training, some D&I training in, just to create a better atmosphere, just to make it easier, so that if someone does feel the urge to come out, it just makes it so much easier for them. And then it allows them to bring their whole self to work, and you'll get a much better worker out of them, because they'll be so much more effective. They'll be happier, and they're more likely to stay with you, and you won't have to spend money on recruiting new people. So that's my top tips for employers.
Fantastic. There's a really great bit of advice, and I'm sure there's things that everyone could do to be more open and be more accepting of people and not wanting to pass judgment.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Katie. Thank you for giving up some of your afternoon. Thank you for this really great little chat we've had. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned some things about you today that, even though I know you quite well, we've talked about things that I didn't know about you before. And to our listeners, well, thank you for listening. Please do subscribe and click on the link below. You can keep updated with future episodes of the Inclusion Bites podcast. That's Bites, BITES. I have a number of exciting guests lined up. that I'm sure you will be inspired by over the next few weeks and months. And remember, if you'd like to be a guest, then please do let me know. So my name is Joanne Lockwood. So joe.lockwood@seechangehappen.co.uk. I welcome your feedback and suggestions and how we can improve the show. It's been a pleasure. See you soon. Bye.